there was an idea to bring together two worlds from pop culture to create the most clickbaity title we possibly could for an episode of Question of the Week. This week's question: if you were in charge of Avengers 4, which wrestlers would you cast as themselves with superpowers to help the Avengers?
Combining Avengers and wrestling was pretty fun. And the first person I thought of instantly right off the bat was Xavier Woods. WWE's quintessential nerd boy. So I made him as my first character that was brought in, my first wrestler brought in as a character in Avengers 4, whatever it's going to be called. And I essentially gave him something that's pseudo like the Beast. Playing off the fact that he's got a PhD, so his character's going to be super smart, and having enhanced in agility. But then, unlike the Beast, he's going to have the power of positivity, which is being able to influence people's moods by making them more positive at his own will. The only thing is that when he uses his power, he sacrifices his own inner positivity, and if he uses so much that he runs out of positivity without giving himself time to recharge, then he kind of gets angry and hulks out and becomes an alter ego called Consequences Creed, who kind of just freaks out and blows everything up or destroys whatever he can find and creates a giant negative effect on the world. The way I'd put him into this story is, he would be recruited to kind of help formulate a plan. He'd be pretty confident because, he'd be one of the people thinking that Thanos is an evil villain, when Thanos is really content with what he's done because he feels like he's balanced the universe back out. So you're gonna have Woods use the power of positivity to try and turn Thanos happy, I guess, or positive, and it's not going to work because Thanos now is in a positive mind frame, I suppose, and he will eventually use up all of his positivity and change the Consequences Creed and become a secondary underlying problem for the rest of the Avengers group. Where you get guys like Hulk who will have to come in to essentially take him out long enough for him to revert back to Xavier Woods. My second person I brought in, because of being one of my all-time favorites, is Cesaro. I call him the Neutralizer. Essentially super soldier-esque capabilities like Captain America. And he has a power to either shoot a direct beam of energy or create a field of energy that neutralizes most people's superpowers. So it wouldn't really work on Iron Man, who has a super suit, but somebody who has natural superpowers or certain enhancements like Captain America would be nullified. In keeping with the theme of being neutral, the character would be completely unbiased to whatever's going on, essentially being a hired gun only. So that would create in the story sort of a sense of uneasiness with the heroes. If he's helping the Avengers, you're going to have characters who are not going to trust him at all. And you could have even a potential switch to the other side, or a double cross, where he ends up being good or bad, whichever way it goes, it could work. Then the third person I put in is Becky Lynch as Firepower. She'd be cybernetically enhanced and have the power to create or manipulate weapons. I think of it as somewhere like a middle ground between Cable and Forge, just no time traveling. And in the story, in the movie, her idea, she'd mainly be like a backup character used in the fight scenes, kind of like a Hawkeye. Not super important or super relevant to the story, but also end up in like sort of like a Q in James Bond sort of situation, where you might have a moment where she's going through and like giving Captain America a new enhanced shield, giving Hawkeye a cooler upgraded bow, whatever have you, that she comes up with. However, so it happens. The fourth person I put in was Shinsuke. His power would be the ability to change his body into any material that he touches for fighting and camouflage. The power isn't instant, like he doesn't just touch a tree and then his whole body is wood. It kind of starts at the location of the touch and then moves its way. So if he wanted his shoulder to turn metal, he'd have to touch something and then wait for it to travel up his arm. That way, so if he wanted to do his whole body, it would take a few seconds. It wouldn't be instant. He would be most typically a comic relief character, but one who's very, very good to have in the fight situation. So it'd be kind of like a Drax type character. He ends up being recruited to fight Thanos and help the Hulk and whoever else contain Consequence of Creed. And he does so to make him a physical match for Thanos. They want him to turn his entire body into vibranium. And the idea is that he's never turned his entire body into any one material, so he kind of has reservations that he doesn't know whether or not, if he goes completely 100% to not himself, will he ever turn back. And then eventually they convince him to do it. And the coolest part is that you get a fight scene, an awesome fight scene between Thanos and essentially a Japanese Colossus that's made of vibranium. And then the last person I put in was Velveteen Dream, and he just goes by the Dream or Dream. And he, in this story, he comes from a different planet to Earth after Thanos has wiped out half the planet population of the existence. The idea is that as a small child or baby, he touched one of the Infinity Stones. I said the Mind Stone specifically, which helped develop his powers, but he survived, which, a lot of people don't get to touch one of the Infinity Stones and live to tell about it. But since he did that, it kind of gave him the ability to read minds and mind control people, especially those with like weaker willpower, and gives him like a sort of foresight ability. So like in combat, he can see sort of a punch coming before it happens. The biggest power that he's got, though, is getting into people's heads and showing them their own dreams, sort of like their biggest desires or their nightmares, sort of, and bring those forefront and make them seem like reality. And the idea is that he uses his powers eventually to force Thanos to relive the memory of himself killing Gamora over and over again, which eventually causes Thanos to break down and become so angry at himself that Thanos will use the Reality Stone and create a duplicate version of himself, send that version back in time to stop himself from killing Gamora, which then in turn doesn't allow him to collect all the Infinity Stones. And then so we cut back to the scene where all the Avengers are fighting Thanos at the end of Infinity Wars, but this time Thanos isn't all-powerful, never gets to snap, and they kind of do get to maybe not kill Thanos or completely destroy him, but at least ward him off, trap him, something. Just in general, he would be defeated. So yeah, I got the 5. That's who they were. That's their powers. That's where they fit in the story. That was long. Go away. Get the other guy in here.
Okay, not gonna lie. When Thomas asked this question, I geeked out a little too hard because I think about this type of stuff a lot. So the idea of combining wrestlers with superheroes was a really fun idea. He did kind of give us the rule that we couldn't like create backstories, so we were literally making superpowered versions of the wrestlers we were choosing. So one of the last ones, these were a couple of the last people I decided to add, but I went with the War Raiders and Sarah Logan. Sarah Logan is currently engaged to Ray Monroe, so I kept them all kind of combined. But essentially, the three of them are all Asgardians who have decided to live on Earth. Now, they've been removed from Asgard for a while, but with Loki gone, the Warriors 3 all dead, and Sif has been MIA for a while, Thor actually ends up going down to Earth. It's in Earth, and is trying to find any lost Asgardian soldiers, since Asgard is no longer a place. And especially since potentially a lot of people just kind of disappeared after the attack Thanos did on the ship. So he ends up finding the three of them at an NXT house show, kind of reveals who he is, reveals how he knows them. And so then you have, he appreciates that they've kept their lineage kind of in how they live. Both Ray Monroe and Hanson being the War Raiders on NXT, Rowe and Logan, the way they kind of live their life is they live, they live a Viking lifestyle as far as, they're into a lot of the Viking beliefs, and so a lot of that stuff kind of coincides with who they would be. Thor really appreciates this, and so he says, I need you guys to be the saviors that you've been trying to be. Sarah Logan is an aspiring Valkyrie, and the other two are actually descendants of the soldiers of Odin, and so they kind of fulfill their purpose, but not for Asgard, for the entire universe. And so the fact that they've all created their own weapons and everything, there's a little bit more godly power. So you combine that with the fact that Thor has Stormbreaker. It's an Asgardian onslaught at one point. I had another scene in Avengers 4, since we're kind of booking how Avengers 4 goes, that there's another scene where they go back to Nidavellir, and Eitri ends up making a new Valkyrie blade for Sarah Logan. Then you have two massive swords, or maybe some battle axes for the War Raiders. The three of them actually, with Thor, end up just having a huge onslaught on Thanos. That's kind of their whole situation, and potentially the distraction of three other Asgardian soldiers allows for maybe Thor to get the killing blow on Thanos, with Stormbreaker taking the headshot that Thanos kind of gave him shit for not taking earlier, before the snap happened. Next, I have the Usos. So they have, because they're the only set of twins in their family, they're extra gifted is kind of what I went with, and so they have two abilities that are kind of the same thing. So the first introduction to their first ability actually comes from the remnants of the tribes from Wakanda end up kind of coming in, and you have like M'Baku leading all of his people. You have Okoye leading the Wakandans as well, and like all of them doing their war chants and everything. And then in the middle of those war chants, they start to die down, and then you hear the Usos doing the Sivatau. And so as the crowd kind of parts, there's just these two, the two Usos, shirtless, got, the tattoos are all there. They're dancing in unison, and actually they create two clones of themselves. So essentially, Jimmy and Jay both have a set of twins. So there's 6 of them. 6 Usos run down with the Wakandan soldiers, warriors, whatever you want to call them. Huge battle. There's probably some extra little pawns that Thanos ends up throwing at him. So this first ability kind of separates themselves, and so each of the clones are a little weaker. So they'll probably get taken out after a while, after sustaining enough damage. But then after a bunch of Wakandans have died, the Usos are kind of back to just themselves. Maybe M'Baku and Okoye are like, trying to get the morale back up and try and get the soldiers back in the fight. The Usos then start in lower tones doing the Civetao again, more in unison, and their tattoos actually start to glow, and it allows them to like combine almost fusion dance and become like a Titan Uso. So they end up being about as tall as Thanos, and so then they go into a huge like heavy on heavy fist fight with Thanos. This is actually a breaking point for the Hulk, who in the beginning of Infinity War gets taken out by Thanos. He sees this and goes, all right, I'm jumping in. He didn't want to come out at all in the last movie, so he joins a Titan Uso. Big 2-on-1 battle, probably wear Thanos down a lot. So that's the scene where the Usos are at. I also had Mustafa Ali. He's kind of a modern day Captain America type of thing. A guy who wanted to create change. He wanted to promote change and acceptance and everything. He's always kind of had the inner light. They call him the heart of 205 Live. And so within him, being a cop in Chicago and then being a wrestler, his WrestleMania gear actually allows him to focus a light beam in his hand, and very, very Iron Man-esque, but it's more like a personal energy than a created energy. He also has the focus on his chest, so he has the light beam from the hand, the light beam from the chest. So Cap immediately kind of takes a liking to him, seeing that he kind of reminds him of himself. He's not the biggest guy, but he wants to make not only himself better, but people around better and more accepting and everything. So he's got the heart, and that's what Cap kind of really likes. And so because of the light, maybe he can distract some of the blind, potentially Thanos or some of the other villains that are around, whatever may be. But yeah, he's got an inner light that is his ability. And then I had to go with this because he's already a superhero. I had to go with the Hurricane. So the idea is that when he was the Hurricane, he actually was a superhero, but took time off of being a superhero because there wasn't a lot for superheroes at the time. And so he just kind of he went through WCW just as himself, and then when he was able to be a superhero again, he was kind of portraying his glory days as a superhero. So now he actually has to use his ability to help save the world. Although he's a little older, so he's not quite as strong, but he still has the super strength. He can fly. He can actually create like hurricane type winds with the fact that he's as strong and he can fly and everything. He's also got the Hurricycle. So the fact that Shane Helms is ridiculously hilarious and has a quick wit. So him and Tony Stark actually immediately become friends. Tony ends up using kind of sharing his nanotech that he had in Infinity War and making the Hurricycle a little bit more a little stronger, a little more high tech, a little more formidable in battle. And so you've got the Hurricane, you've got Tony Stark, you have War Machine, and you have someone else, and then before Hulk busts out of Bruce Banner is actually using the Hulkbuster still. So you have like this whole like human tech battle all on Thanos. So a lot of guys, a lot of technology, something that might make it a little bit more difficult for Thanos and his people. And then finally, I have Finn Balor, who while wrestling in Japan, his idea to paint up was actually him coming in contact with a symbiote. So, which is essentially kind of why he went with, he did kind of a Carnage look at one point, he was Venom at one point, but the idea is his symbiote is actually able to change its form. So every time he had a different paint job, it was just his symbiote being a different form, but it also, attaching to him, allows him to be faster and stronger and more agile in battle, which helps his wrestling persona as well, which is why when he is the demon, he is infinitely better than he is when he's just Finn Balor. So he actually he winds up on a plane, heading to another show, and doesn't realize that it's actually he kind of sees that it's really empty, and so it's kind of weird until he's approached by Tony Stark, realizes he's on Tony's plane, and they ask him to join the Avengers, and so then he's got this ability to shapeshift. He actually shapeshifts into Gamora, and is another distraction against Thanos, because it gets Thanos thinking, "Oh man, I can't believe I killed you." And we saw he had that like second vision about her. So it would be very mind manipulation for Thanos to see Gamora in the flesh, be able to touch her, and have it be Finn Balor, allowing for a big onslaught from everyone else. So that is my team. You've heard Kevin's team. Let's go over to Thomas and see who has won this week's Question of the Week.
All right. I've heard your answers, and as the white Nick Fury of this team, which hey, that sounds funny, but there is a white Nick Fury, so
wasn't he originally white?
Yeah,
because that's what really confused me the very first time he showed up in like a cutscene. You're like, what Nick Fury? Yeah, because my knowledge, most of my knowledge of Marvel had been based off of some of the video games.
Yeah.
He's always an old white guy.
Yeah. So
looked a little bit more like Mr. Fantastic and Cable kind of slammed together.
So we'll go small tangent real quick, just so I can explain in case you guys don't know.
Okay.
The deal with white Nick, or black and white Nick Fury, is originally he was a white guy, war veteran type, shield agent, and then when they did the Ultimates universe, which was supposed to be a separate continuity that just simplified things for new readers, they decided to base that Nick Fury off of Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And so, when it came time to cast for the movies, they cast Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You're such a fake nerd, Thomas.
Right?
Just do this shit to get attention.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even know what a Marvel is.
Have you even read the DCs? Anyway. What's your verdict here, Thomas?
There's a lot to go through, so I'm not going to get as specific as I normally would. You guys watched the video up to this point, I would assume.
Yeah, I think we were a little more in depth, so they get the
Yeah.
I was vague as fuck.
You would be.
So, we got, for simplicity, Team Xavier versus Team War Raiders. And I'm going to give this verdict to Team War Raiders. On the one thing I liked from what I heard of these pitches was the War Raiders list focused more on tying their actual wrestling careers into them being on the team, such as the War Raiders being Asgardians who were stranded on this earth and wrestling in NXT, such as Mustafa Ali being an NXT wrestler or a WWE wrestler who didn't know he had powers and was inspired by Captain America. So based on that little extra, and I was kind of looking for that specifically, giving it to Team War Raiders.
I won one! Yay!
Alright!
I did, Kevin had some really good answers, though.
Oh, yeah.
This was a fun question to come up with, and, reading some of his, I was like, oh, shit. I was real proud of mine, and then he came up with this bullshit.
Yeah, no,
I think your Cesaro was my favorite.
Cesaro was great. I liked... I mean, there wasn't a bad answer in the bunch, I think. It really just came down to that one specific semantic that just pushed it that little bit over the edge. And with that in mind... Crap, I forgot what my hint word is. I will just stay tuned next time for another question.
Hint word.
Yeah.
Oh God. All right. I'm not that well versed in this side, but
you have a week to research.
All right.
Do it.
Or two if something else comes up.
That's true.
Later.